Just that on the first part. All right, we need to adjourn the solid waste meeting and reconvene the special call meeting. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Go ahead.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, you're back up, man.
Okay, so I have a quick presentation. It's really a summary of what we've seen over the past several, actually probably 2 months. This is where we are in the budget process. It kicked off in February. We had meetings with the departments and constitutional offices. We had work sessions in May. We had a proposed budget presented to y'all on June 4th and a public hearing on June 13th. So the general fund budget, it was balanced at $46,360,821 and includes $578,187 in fund balance use. And this is a $721,894 increase over the current fiscal year, which is 1.58%. And I've mentioned it several times through our meetings that it is a small increase due to the fact that there was some pretty large reductions in workers' comp claims and health insurance claims, which really offset all the increases in this budget. So some of the summary of the major changes in the fiscal year 25 budget is overall, again, our increase is almost $722,000. The Coastal Regional Commission grant revenue for Senior Center previously managed by PSA will be receiving that directly. PSA was managing the Senior Center, and we're going to be taking over that management of it. So we'll be receiving the grant funding directly. And then there's a component match to that so that there is an actual expense from the general fund as well. And that increase in revenue is almost $169,000. Our fund balance use, although we have $578,000 budgeted, this really is a reduction from what we used last year. So it was a $1.3 million reduction over the fiscal year 24 budgeted fund balance use. Probate court revenue has decreased by about $141,000 in the fiscal year 25 budget. Interest earnings, I decreased that by about $75,000 due to the fact that we're using some of our fund balance. We don't know what the interest rates will do next year, but we're getting really nice interest rates this year. But I do think that there'll be a small decrease. License and permits, an increase of about $105,000. And a big change, which was a decrease, was the state of Georgia had the homeowners tax relief grant. And we had to actually recognize that money. It was an offset on citizens' tax bills. So I had to actually recognize that as grant revenue rather than property tax revenue once we received it. So of course, the state of Georgia doesn't have that for the 2024 taxes. So that is a big reduction in the budget as well. And then for expenditures, our payroll increases, we're budgeting a 2.5% increase on annual salaries and benefits. And that's about $572,000, and that's tied to annual performance reviews. New positions, 7 new positions and 2 part-time positions. Paramedic pay increases for $237,000, and that affects both the general fund and the unincorporated tax district. Contracted services, the lobbyist position is 50% funded, so it'll start potentially on January 1st. So that's funded at $45,000. I already talked about the senior center, which used to be funded by special appropriations. Now it's in a separate department. Grant match, we increased that from $100,000 to $150,000, and some airport funding of $90,000. The project is funded by the Georgia Department of Transportation grant, but we need to have some match, which is the environmental assessment and airport layout plan, which is a 5% share, and also the site selection. And the county's responsible for 100% of that. We think that $90,000 will cover both of those expenses. And then also we had an increase in cloud computing fees of almost $200,000. Additionally, the DA had an existing position that they lost. The ARPA funding ended for that. So they asked for an increase of $73,779. The EMS fire split changed from an 84-16 split to a 90-10 split, which shifted a lot of the expenses from the unincorporated tax district to the general fund. And that calculation of the split is based on the number of fire calls in the prior year. Again, the senior center, we're taking that on, and that there are currently 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. The JDA, we're increasing it by $66,000 to $750,000. And again, the insurance, the employee health and workers' comp decreased almost by 1.9 million, the claims budget. And it was quite high last year and the year before, but we feel as though that will not continue into fiscal year 25. And the property, equipment, vehicle, and liability, we're still waiting on the final quotes, but we did budget a 17% increase. So if there's anything really significant, once we get those final numbers in, we would come back for a budget amendment in July, once we have final numbers. And of course, the deductible has not changed from fiscal year 24. It's still $350,000 for vehicles and $250,000 for liabilities. It transfers out of special appropriations that the general fund funds capital improvements of almost $1.3 million. And also supplemental funding to 911 of $206,000. And again, we're using fund balance of about $578,000 to balance the budget. This is a summary of the general fund budget just by the functions of general government, judicial, public safety, public works, health and welfare, cultural and recreation, housing and development. And again, the budget total for the general fund is $46,360,821. Our capital expenditures, these are new requests. So capital expenditures, once they're funded, many just carry over year to year. So I don't present them as a new project, but these would be the new projects. And they total 4.3 million. And the largest one is the unincorporated service district, which were some engines for fire rescue and also the capital improvement funds. And you have details of that in your proposed budget. And this, I had this slide last week. Also, this is the ARPA fund. And what this is just showing you is the second column over of numbers. That's reallocating some of the funding due to, like, say, the county health department. That's going to be funded by the SPLOST excess, as discussed with the cities. They were going to contribute out of their ARPA fund as well, but we're going to be using that fund instead. Another item is the HVACs. We just needed to reallocate some money to the parks. And we also needed to, the other night at the Board of Commissioners meeting, there was the approval of the radios. And so at the very bottom, you can see after all of that reallocation and also in expected reimbursement from PSA, they had money in their SPLOST 8 for our parks projects, and very little of that has been spent. But we, of course, have some park projects, one of which is going to be presented a little bit later in the meeting. And we will be billing them for the maximum amount that we can through their SPLOST 8. So by doing that, we freed up almost $900,000. But due to the radio projects, the cost, we're going to reallocate that fully up to the very top line, the radios for the 800 megahertz. And this is a summary of all funds. Again, the general fund is the first one for 46 million. And on the left-hand side, those are all the special revenue funds, very specialized sources of revenue and very restricted uses of expenditures. And on the right-hand side is the enterprise fund, and the total of all budgets for Camden County is $86,768,327. There's just one other item that has been being discussed, and this is not included in the budgets. And I'm just presenting this as a point on whether or not you want me to change the budget before we do adoption. So the only available funding we have for the gun range noise abatement is in the general fund using fund balance. So the options are really just to fund it in fiscal year 25 budget and determine an amount to be budgeted. Further discussion is needed, or there's no funding. So of course we could adopt the budgets without anything and then do a budget amendment later, or we could go into fiscal year 25 having a number set there. So I just wanted that to be pointed out. And that's all I have for that. So I could go into the adopting unless you want to discuss that further or have any questions.
Anybody got any questions from that?
No, I don't, Chairman.
Didn't we talk about the gun range last meeting?
Yeah, I mentioned about doing, adding money for insulating the pistol canopy. But
What did we decide?
we didn't decide anything. Um,
When it was last discussed, it was at a public hearing, so I don't think anything could be voted on at the public hearing. That's-
now, if you don't want to add it on, now's the time to do it.
Do we have the updated price?
It was 120,000 to do the acoustics up under the pistol range canopy.
That's $120,000 rate that spend it. This is not gonna stop.
You don't think it'll slow it down either?
It's not gonna stop the complaining either. When you get one person.
It will help out the users of the range.
Right. Yeah, you know, whenever we were constructing the range, just kind of go back a few years, we did want to add the acoustics there. We just did not have the funds available at that time. So I do think, you know, the patrons of the facility would enjoy it. It would cut down on some of the concussion and reverberation of that noise a little bit up under there, up under the canopy. So it would improve the user experience. But it is a lot of money. I understand that.
Well, I'll make a motion, we add that, 125,000.
Yeah, I'd probably go a little high just because it has been just a little bit since we got the quotes. So, you know, generally those quotes are good for 30 days. But I wouldn't expect the pricing to adjust that much,
It's just on the pistol.
just on the pistol range canopy. Yes, sir.
We would have to approve it again when it comes back. to
Correct.
actually sign the contract, so if
Correct.
it was ever, 120,000, we get approved at that time.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
I'll second my motion.
Discussion? All in favor? Those opposed?
So that was just to add 120,000 to the budget. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would just record that as a transfer out of the general fund over to the Sun Range Fund.
Right.
Any other questions?
All right, I'll make a motion, we approve this budget amended.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? Move on to item number 2.
So this agenda item is the approval of the fiscal year 25 indigent defense contract. The funding source of this is the general fund, and the total expense is $362,769.78. It's an increase from the fiscal year 24 budget for $3,340.56. And it is tied to the approval of the budget. That's why I saved it for tonight. And it's, this is an annual contract agreement for the Public Defender's Office based on the proposed FY20, or the adopted fiscal year 25 budget. The contract falls under the provisions of the Georgia Indigent Defense Act of 2003 to provide legal representation to indigent defendants in criminal cases consistent with the standards adopted by the GPDSC. And this contract will reflect only Camden County's share of the prorata share for personnel costs, including supplements and the office operations for the 5-county circuit.
All right, can I get a motion on this item?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
The first and second, any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Contract. Item number 3.
Mr. Chairman, so from our last meeting where we approved the tennis court, well, actually not just tennis courts, pickleball courts, tennis courts, basketball courts. At our last regular meeting, there was a request to add in bonding and also to convert the Browntown basketball courts to pickleball courts. So what that did to the overall price was increase it by $71,761.75. Out of that 71,000, $37,261.75 is for the bond. The remaining 34,500 was for the pickleball court out at Browntown. So with that, we would ask for your approval And then we'll go ahead and start working with, the contractor, Southeastern Tennis Courts, to go ahead and get all the projects started.
All right, can I get a motion on this out?
I'll make a motion to approve the additional quotes from Southeastern Tennis Courts for bonding and to convert the Browntown Women's Park basketball court into an additional pickleball court as presented in the amount of $71,761.75.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
What's that about for the bond?
The bond, was $37,261.75.
There's more room at the Browntown Park to add another basketball court if we have. All right, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you, Chairman.
Brings us to our last public comment section. Still not gonna bite, Sheriff?
Not everybody is on.
All right, this brings us to adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Got a first and second to adjourn. All in favor? Those opposed? Whoever can stay late. All right, thank y'all.